Hi, Gelfly here. There are a few games in the world that I adore as much as LEGO Pirates of the Caribbean. Yes, not even Minecraft, and yes, even its PSP port. I played it before I even knew what multiplication was, and I still take my box copy out of the closet sometimes and ponder its marvelous paper cover. No shame whatsoever though, the physical medium stays good. So, while it's true I'm extremely biased, also given my love for the first three movies from this franchise, I found myself more and more in need to put nostalgia aside and verify this claim. Find actual reasons that could once and for all prove this 14-year-old gem from TT Games is genuinely so great, and pinpoint what makes it stand out from all the other amazing LEGO titles. The Star Wars Saga, Indiana Jones, and LEGO Chess 1998. Yeah, that's a classic. But as I started researching this topic, playing through the game again instead of paying attention to my university classes, I realized there's something much bigger than just Pirates of the Caribbean that needs to be talked about. If you're a fan of both old and new LEGO games, or just took a peek at that thumbnail, you might know what I'm hinting at. The contentious topic of voice acting versus mumbling. A change that technically came about with the release of LEGO Batman 2, but in reality happened all the way back with LEGO Island, the second video game based around LEGOs ever. It's complicated.
Way cool.
Nonetheless, it was 2012 when casting voice talent for LEGO games became a point of contention among the fans. Up to that point, gibberish and mumbles were used to represent speech, and by the late 2010s, they became the de facto standard in most of these titles, especially those created by likely the most well-known of LEGO game developers, the illustrious Traveler's Tales. Yes, these guys made pirates. That's right. Whether the developers planned it or not, mumbles became this unmistakable symbol of the early LEGO games. The unique and funny way they told their stories. Another fancy word people like to call them is the charm, something the series has supposedly lost, and something tons of other properties aimed at similar demographics have tried to copy over the years. Look no further than the stole so much new Funko Fusion. The game itself is, it's not that great, but that's beside the point. I don't think I've seen a single review of it that didn't explicitly mention how the puzzle-based gameplay plus characters bumbling and gesturing all over the place felt straight out of an old LEGO game. It's such a big staple that even today, this connotation is really hard to shake off. And so, here comes this very important question. Is one truly better than the other? Are fans of LEGO games from the early 2000s fully in the right? Or are they just old heads who refuse to see voice acting as one of many quality of life improvements made to the series over the years? The truth is, both voice acting and mumbles have their own strengths and weaknesses, many of which have been pointed out and vehemently defended over the years. So, while I'll still be looking primarily from my LEGO Pirates lens, let's try to give up the rose-tinted glasses, round those thoughts up, and a few nuanced things to a modern-day perspective, and come to an at least somewhat clear conclusion. Who knows, maybe these two completely different worlds can somehow coexist. Maybe, but that's coming a bit later. First, let's get the groundwork out of the way and try to define the LEGO game eras. Because boy, you'd think it'd be easy to at least decide on the objective evolution milestones of the franchise, but nope. Because there were tons of different studios making LEGO games since the 90s, drawing up a definitive timeline divided into eras is harder than it seems. But just like many other people on the internet, I still tried. I'd start with the somewhat surprising early concepts era. Yeah, this one is more of an interesting tidbit, but even before LEGO Island came about, there already were two fully fleshed out ideas for LEGO games, one of which technically got published. The other, more obscure one though, never even happened. Linking Leroy Visits Legoland was a prototype developed by a small studio called Fairlight somewhere between 1992 and 1994, and would hold the prestigious title of the first LEGO game ever if it actually released. It was planned to be a side-scrolling platformer for the still popular at the time Commodore 64, but even the vibrant, cartoony graphics and first ever virtual representations of LEGO bricks weren't enough for the project to be greenlit. Surprisingly, the game got so far into development without the LEGO group approving it. Fairlight just kind of hoped they would. It didn't happen though, as back then, LEGO wasn't too keen on licensing its brand to video game companies yet. An idea was floated to strip Linking Leroy of all LEGO stuff, but that concept fell through as well, and the project was ultimately cancelled. There was also LEGO Fun to Build, a 2D puzzle/racing game made by Sega that did end up actually being released in 1995. Though, considering it only got published in Japan and on top of that ran only on the little educational console called the Sega Pico, it's hard to consider it the first big, proper LEGO game in this ranking. That title has to go to Mindscape's LEGO Island in 1997, the success of which led the brick company to rethink their approach, greenlight more upcoming titles, and work on them having much wider releases in the future. It marks the beginning of what I like to call the experimentation era, heralded by the calling together of LEGO Media Group, a separate division overseeing video game production and licensing. Are you with me still? Trust me, it's gonna get interesting. Just you wait. The company started releasing their games on consoles, handhelds, and in general, this time was definitely marked by trial and error, trying out different formulas and seeing what sticks. And so, gamers got treated to a theme park builder in Legoland, a racing sim called Lego Racers, and an action strategy title called Lego Rock Raiders, among others. Both the games as well as the reports were handled by different entities and studios, though Lego Media had a brief romance, can I call it that? With Electronic Arts, having them take over game publishing for a bit. Okay, if not romance, then what? A one-night stand? No, that makes it worse. That makes it so much worse. Well, they achieved relative success in those experimental years. I guess it wasn't enough for the brick company to justify their existence. And so, they opted out of the video game business, Lego Media shutting down in 2004. Which brings us to the Renaissance era. Arguably the most important, and just partly because LEGO Pirates fits neatly into the tail end of it. Traveler's Tales noticed the potential in building titles around third-party IPs, especially given the appeal of the Harry Potter expansion in 2001. And as we all probably know, this bet paid off. LEGO Star Wars not only garnered favorable reviews from critics, for the first time ever, mind you, but made a lot of money. That simple fact landed Traveler's Tales as LEGO's primary game development studio in an instant. Over the next decade or so, they released tens of highly acclaimed titles, adapting both movies and original LEGO IPs, but something shifted after 2012 ended. In the eyes of many fans, the release of LEGO Batman 2 marks the beginning of the modern era, which, as a side note, might be coming to an end soon, with LEGO wanting to make more of their games in-house, collaborate less with third-party studios. It departed a lot from the Renaissance formula pioneered by Traveler's Tales, though it still continued to build off of it. Tons of new mechanics and gameplay ideas were added, including near open-world hubs, more unique characters, graphical enhancements. There's a lot to mention here. Some newer titles have all of their environments built out of bricks. I always miss that while playing LEGO Pirates. It doesn't help with readability, but gosh, it's just so cool. And due to those numerous additions, LEGO games got significantly longer. That's definitely good from a more bang for your buck kind of approach, but it has turned some players away who were used to the snappiness of the Renaissance titles. In general, I've seen the sentiment that newer LEGO games tend to feel more bloated, or overloaded with content. And that's one of the reasons I just couldn't bring myself to finish LEGO Jurassic World or LEGO Movie the Video Game. So I do relate that front. But yeah, these are my proposed LEGO game eras. Again, there's no one definitive way of classifying these games, so it's all up for interpretation. Though even if it's not all-encompassing and perfect, this timeline will help us a lot in addressing the elephant in the room. The title of this video! The addition of voice acting. So yeah, as I mentioned before, Batman 2 tossed voice acting into the mix. The change proved a bit controversial after years of players hearing the characters mumble, but Traveler's Tales forged ahead with this new approach. While there were still countless visual gags, the emphasis now was on spoken dialogue and in-game narrative. And I think number one, it comes down to the clash between simpler stories and complex ones, with visual gags being the sad collateral damage. See, most of the early LEGO games were straightforward adaptations of movies. The lack of voice acting wasn't really an issue, since players were likely already familiar with the scenes being referenced. And if not, maybe that's for the better. If you'd watched Star Wars, Indiana Jones, or even Pirates, their LEGO counterparts could rely on that knowledge and get by with minimal audio work. LEGO Batman, however, was different. While it borrowed music from existing films and drew inspiration from various parts of Batman lore, it still told an original story. One which, without a direct movie tie-in to lean on, did feel somewhat limited. The addition of voice acting effectively solved this. LEGO Batman 2 introduced a star-studded cast, including Troy Baker as Batman and Clancy Brown once again as Lex Luthor. And this newfound storytelling freedom allowed developers to craft a more elaborate, yet still original Batman adventure, all the while maintaining the series' signature spoof-like humor. Voice acting also really comes in handy when explaining more convoluted elements of the narrative. In LEGO Pirates, for example, there are situations where the very basic idea of a concept is laid across, but because there are no words, it's hard to fully grasp by the player. I never got what the scene with Elizabeth and the medallion meant until I watched the movie myself. There were just too many characters on screen. The 7-year-old me found this very complicated, okay? But they still did their best. So yeah, some concepts, including time travel, medallions, alternate dimensions, are harder to explain effectively with gestures, or just end up being very confusing. And they lose a bit on that emotional appeal as well. Voice acting generally does improve on that quite a lot. Number 2, using well-known actors. Let's be honest, whether it's someone experienced in the voice acting space or a Hollywood star that has never dubbed a character in their life, it generally grants a massive appeal to the project. Getting a huge cast of skilled voice performers can really elevate the whole experience. Plus, it's always nice to find out someone you already know and like hopped on the project to record some voice lines for it. But here's the funny thing, you can do that and have that with just mumbles. Not to the same extent, but still, Johnny Depp actually reprised his role from the Pirates of the Caribbean in the LEGO video game, doing all sorts of grunts for it. Not a well-known fact, but shows you can kind of have the cake and eat it too. Number 3, the argument of money. Cost-cutting in general. It's not exactly clear as far as I'm aware. There's no concrete info on TD Games always wanting to go with voice acting and just not having the budget. But then again, this angle would make sense. Paying voice talent or hell Hollywood-class actors to reprise the roles from the movies tends to be pricier than one guy making a few ahms and arms into a mic and calling it a day. So there's that. There is a leaked trailer of the first LEGO Star Wars game with full voice acting, so there's something that supports this idea, but then again, it could have been just a test.
There is something else behind all this, Your Highness. They will kill you if you stay. I can only protect you. I can't fight a war for you.
Number 4. With voice acting, the comedy isn't restricted to just cutscenes or specific in-game sequences. This freedom, in turn, lets developers cram in more jokes and advance the story more effectively, while players focus on what's most important. That's exploring the levels. Even in LEGO games that use archived and pre-recorded lines from actual films, the audio still works as a complement to the visual humor. It either reinforces the joke made in the source material itself, or even better, uses it as a contrast, something way more silly happening in the background. As Pineapple Grenadier points out, animators can take a line literally, for example, warping what would have been a tongue-in-cheek remark into a full-on absurdist gag, thus building upon the familiarity of the films to create a fresh experience with a touch more levity. And finally, beyond adding just humor, voice acting aids in helping players who are lost and confused in levels. Characters will often vocalize their goals with the camera focusing on their specific points of interest, and they will also speak up when they are near a puzzle they can solve. All very helpful things that can truly make a difference when you're stumbling around the level for the 5th time looking for hard-to-find secrets. I'm looking at you, the Preverend Court. Anyways, those are the upsides, but you know me, this video isn't gonna get to the 20-minute mark by itself. We gotta play devil's advocate here. I was so used to LEGO characters mumbling, I didn't expect just how much voice acting actually improves the newer games. And while these arguments seem sure as hell compelling, not all of them are without faults. Besides the argument of money again, because, you know, grunts are a lot cheaper, let's start with a simple one, the quality of voice acting. While it can definitely uplift the general experience, what's often overlooked is that it can just as easily downgrade it. The actor's misguided performance, awkward or out-of-place voice direction, hell, the writing of the voice lines themselves. It's a big task to have them all come together at the same time, and even more so if you're using pre-recorded dialogue ripped straight out of the movies. The grander franchises, such as Marvel's Avengers, do just that, and while the voices do sound good, it's the original actors after all, duh, and it's probably very time-saving, it does give off a much cheaper sound.
Artificial intelligence. You never even hesitated.
You're not the director of me.
I'm not the director of anybody.
With no isolated voice files from the set, The developers are clearly working with what they have, but hearing exactly when the newly recorded voice lines come in is a bit jarring, especially since it happens multiple times during gameplay. Bits of dialogue rubbing people the wrong way aside, there's also the case of recastings, such as with the SAG-AFTRA strikes and the Marvel Superheroes 2 debacle. Between 2015 and 17, the American Union representing video game actors and performers set to negotiate new terms, including more safety protections, residuals, and bonuses if the game sold well, among other things. But since the entire cast of the previous game was on strike, and waiting it out wasn't really an option, Traveler's Tales went with a completely different, fully British, and non-unionized approach instead, leading to a slight whiplash among players, suddenly hearing a different cast from characters they spent so much time with in the prequel. That's not a big problem if you're doing one-offs, but LEGO games in the modern era tend to be focused on sequels, spin-offs more than anything. And it can be even worse if that one familiar character in particular doesn't sound like their movie or TV counterpart at all. It really brings you out of a scene. Or would LEGO Pirates? They don't have that problem. New LEGO Boba Fett does, though.
That's some nice armor.
This familiarity with the source material, the point that I made before in the positive sense, does the opposite in this scenario. You can't always get an actor that sounds close to the original, and that's fine. But again, it's a little weird Boba doesn't sound like Boba when they've nailed all the other characters. Maybe besides Kylo. Why does he sound like that?
It's you. Okay, come on, Ben. Keep it together. Dreamed of this moment.
I haven't really seen many people mention this, but at times it really does feel like you're just rewatching the same thing with an extra few jokes thrown in. Back in the day when Traveler's Tales put their own spin on a movie's story, it felt familiar yet was warped into something completely different. Packed with slapstick, with playful reinterpretations on the side. That sense of transformation feels a bit less pronounced now. The humor is still there, the levity hasn't gone anywhere, but sometimes it's like the game isn't remixing the source material as much as it's just reenacting. Speaking of, it's worth mentioning repeating voice lines too, as their amount is always limited to some extent. So sooner or later, you'll hear NPCs using the same one-liners. When characters constantly mention how there might be a secret here, or it's a switch that I can trigger, that can really undermine the aspects of exploring levels and discovering secrets yourself. It's a modern video game curse, to be honest, so I'm not ragging on LEGO games specifically here, but sometimes that can be a bit too much. And finally, it's number 4. Limitation breeds innovation. It's very funny I'm saying that in the context of LEGO characters speaking gibberish, but hey, it works! Using mumbles and grunts allows for unique comedic moments that can't really be replicated in any other way. Switching alliances during World's End, for example, along with plenty of other tricky-to-explain concepts, are handled in such clever and genuinely funny ways, the argument becomes less about the mumbling itself, but about the charades done to overcome it. That's a Reddit quote, by the way. Their charm is likely why many LEGO fans feel voice acting has gutted the soul of this series. As with direct exposition taking precedence over pantomime, jokes might feel like an afterthought. Comedy that's only shoehorned into movie dialogue instead of feeling like an organic part of it. Even speaking from experience, I can tell you limitations are some of the best ways of sparking creativity. Something you see very clearly in the PSP port of LEGO Pirates. It has its downsides. No co-op, extremely easy puzzles, and the fighting system where you can win with your eyes closed are some of them. But because of those inherent hardware limitations, this version of the game had to be built from the ground up with this caveat in mind. And that's what made it so amazing. Developers changed most of the mechanics, completely rethought all of the levels, 4 of which got different cutscenes exclusive to this version for some reason. With them being smaller in scope, it actually made the game better to play, considering where people usually take their handhelds and how much time they actually have in those moments. The PC/console version is out there if you want to experience the all-around best version of Pirates LEGO has to offer, but if you don't mind a few trade-offs and really cherish that portability, there's always an alternative. And you know what? That might be the key to this whole thing. We went over the ups and downs, the good and the bad of voice acting in LEGO games. But what if players didn't have to choose between one or the other? What if, just like with picking the platform and version of the game they want to play on, they could decide whether or not they want to hear characters talk? A toggleable mumble mode, as it came to be known, is not something I made up just now. It's actually one of the most touted features of the Skywalker saga. The at the time newest and largest game ever from Traveler's Tales. It's a bit buried in the extras menu, but it is unlocked for free since the beginning. You don't have to fork over your precious stats for it. Once you get to this option and enable it, well, it's pretty self-explanatory. All voice lines are replaced with mumbles.
Remember, concentrate on the moment. Feel, don't think. Use your instincts.
I will.
May the Force be with you.
Uh-huh.
You might be thinking, well, why is this the first time a modern LEGO game has a mode like this? And it's probably because the Skywalker Saga was advertised as an all-encompassing package, including reimagined levels from the previous 5 games. Given just how many old fans of this series there are, most of them likely got used to grunting minifigures for the past 2 decades. It made sense to give them this alternative way to play. But even though Mumble Mode is a great addition and shows just how much DD Games is listening to their fans, it isn't perfect. It doesn't bring back any of the signature visual gags, and cutscenes stay the same for the most part. Because Mumbles are essentially treated like a dubbed version of the game, you not only don't get slapstick comedy back, you actually end up missing out on important info and jokes. You lose a ton of context and humor that way, essentially pampering your experience for some of that sweet nostalgia. And I don't think it needs to stay that way. So, I hereby present my 2 ideas, 2 possibly better implementations of Mumble Mode that could theoretically happen in the future. Starting with a good compromise. Keep voices for fully original games such as LEGO City Undercover, or in general those that tell a story never before seen in a movie or TV show. However, bring back mumbles for franchise-based games, since technically many people already know how the stories in these series go. LEGO Batman 2, for example, that one would be better off with voices, given its original plot. But games based on specific, existing source material, yeah, they could easily benefit from that sort of approach. If we think of LEGO games as a kind of amusement park ride, well, an amusement ride isn't really meant to give us the same experience as the full movie or franchise it's based on. I do see how this argument gets a bit complicated with Pirates, since the movies came from the ride, but that's beside the point. That was option number 1. Option number 2, more interesting, less alienating in my book. Keep Mumble Mode toggleable like in the Skywalker Saga, but do it on a much larger scale. In that game, cutscenes are sadly the same no matter what mode you choose. I'm sure changing that would quickly end up very costly. You basically have to come up with and animate twice the amount of cutscenes. And there would of course be the dilemma of which version is better, which one is the proper way of playing a LEGO game. But besides that, and the financial costs, I see it only as a win. You give players the choice to choose either a focus on emotional engagement and plot complexity, or a less faithful retelling of those stories, but one that's more laid back and chock full of visual gags. I'm not too sure it's likely to happen, but still, it's a risk worth taking, I think. This version of Mumble Mode would be the ideal scenario, and I also see its potential as yet another factor to replay the story a few times. These games are already one of the best at getting you to replay levels, let me tell you that much. But I feel that replayability never carried over to the cutscenes. With this approach though, I could easily see myself experiencing the whole game again after I beat it. And I'm sure I'm not alone in that. Summing it all up, LEGO games will never go back to solely using grunts and mumbles. And that is fine. Voice acting is part of the LEGO game identity now, and many people, including new fans, couldn't possibly imagine having a title about it nowadays. But the devs know equally as many fans like the other option too, and maybe the recent addition of Mumble Mode is a sign of brighter days ahead. Whichever it will be, we will likely see in a few years. Unless LEGO actually drops DD games, then we might never know. But hey, you tell me, do you have any opinions of your own on this contentious topic? Feel free to share them in the comments. And as always, thanks for watching. Hopefully, see you in the next one. Bye.